"Your wedding can wait, my baby can't," my sister screamed before trying to steal my venue, and that was just the beginning of her terrifying obsession with taking over my entire life. It all exploded at what should have been a normal family barbecue. My sister Claire stood up, champagne flute in hand, though now I realize she wasn't actually drinking, and announced she was pregnant. Everyone cheered. My mother cried happy tears. My father started talking about being a grandpa. Standard family stuff. Then my grandmother asked the innocent question that lit the fuse. "Will you still have your wedding next spring, dear? Or wait until after the baby?" Claire's eyes locked with mine across the table. "Actually," she said with this weird smile I still see in my nightmares, "I was thinking September would be perfect." My stomach dropped. September, my September. My wedding was in 6 weeks. "In fact," she continued, turning to fully face me now, "I was hoping we could just use your venue. I mean, you've been engaged for what, 3 years already? Another few months won't kill you. But I can't stress myself out planning while pregnant." The patio went silent. 20 family members froze. Forks mid-air, all eyes darting between us like we were tennis players about to duel. "That's not possible," I stammered. "We've had this booked for 3 years. Everything is finalized." Claire's husband Josh looked mortified. "Babe, I told you not to do this here." "Do what?" She batted her eyelashes. "Ask my sister for a simple favor. It's not like Emma has ever had to sacrifice anything in her life." Let me pause here and explain something crucial. I've been Claire's personal assistant, emotional support animal, and scapegoat since she was born. When we were kids, my birthdays mysteriously became family celebration days, where she got presents too. In high school, I had to skip my own prom committee meetings to drive her to dance class. I wrote her college essays, let her borrow my clothes until they were ruined, and move back home after college to help her through her anxiety year when she couldn't handle freshman classes. And now, after I'd finally put myself first, finishing my PhD, finding an amazing partner, and planning my dream wedding, she wanted to take that too. My fiance Adrian squeezed my hand under the table. "We can't change our date," he said firmly. "We have family flying in from overseas." My mother's head snapped toward him. "But surely you understand that a baby changes everything. Claire can't possibly plan a wedding while pregnant. She needs this. She needs my wedding venue, the one we booked and paid for." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Claire's face crumpled on cue, tears streaming perfectly down her cheeks without smudging her makeup. I just thought, since we're sisters, you'd want to help me. That's enough. Adrian stood up. "Emma, we're leaving." As we walked to the car, my phone started vibrating nonstop. Texts from my father. "Your sister is hysterical. How could you embarrass her like this?" From my mother. "Call me immediately. We need to fix what you've done." From my grandmother. "I raised you better than this." I turned off my phone. The next morning, I woke up to 37 missed calls and a novel's worth of text messages. But the most disturbing thing wasn't from family. It was an email from our wedding planner, Melissa. "Hi, Emma. I'm a bit confused. Your mother called claiming you wanted to transfer your wedding venue booking to your sister. Obviously, I can't make such a significant change without written authorization from you. Please, call me to clarify." My hands shaking, I called Melissa immediately. "Thank God," she said when she heard my voice. "I was getting worried. Your mother was insistent. She said you had agreed to give your sister your date but were too emotional to handle the details yourself." "That's absolutely not true," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We are not changing anything about our wedding." "I figured as much." Melissa sounded relieved. "But there's something else you should know. Your mother asked for copies of all your vendor contracts to help you organize. I said I couldn't release those without your permission." Cold dread washed over me. "Thank you for checking. Please put a password on our account. No information gets released to anyone but me or Adrian." Adrian, who had been listening beside me, looked grim. "We need to call all the vendors directly. Now." We spent the next 3 hours contacting every single person involved in our wedding. The florist told us my mother had already called, claiming I wanted to transfer my flowers to another event. The photographer said my sister had emailed, asking about updating the contract with the bride's new information. The caterer reported that someone claiming to be me had tried to change the menu to accommodate a pregnant bride. They were trying to hijack our entire wedding piece by piece. My phone rang again. My brother Mark, who lived across the country. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded. "Mom just called saying you promised Claire your wedding venue months ago, and now you're backing out because you're jealous she's pregnant." I explained what had actually happened. Mark was silent for a moment. "This doesn't surprise me," he finally said. "Remember when Claire crashed your college graduation party and announced she'd been accepted to that summer program in Europe, the one you got rejected from? How could I forget? Everyone spent the rest of the night congratulating her. That's why I moved 2,000 miles away." Mark said, "I love them, but our parents have always had Claire-colored glasses on. Listen, I'll handle them. You focus on locking down your wedding." I was so grateful I nearly cried. Mark had always been the only one who saw through Claire's manipulations. 2 days later, Adrian and I were having dinner with his parents when my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "This is Josh. Claire doesn't know I'm contacting you. Can we meet tomorrow? There's something you need to know." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop across town. Josh looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, constantly checking over his shoulder. "Claire's not pregnant," he blurted out as soon as we sat down. I nearly choked on my coffee. "What?" "She bought a fake test online. There's no baby." He rubbed his temples. "I found the packaging and confronted her. She admitted everything, said she needed something dramatic to convince you to to give up your venue. Why would she do this? Why would she lie about something so serious? Josh looked miserable. She's always been competitive with you, but this is different. Ever since you got engaged, it's like she's obsessed with having everything you have, but bigger and better. When we got engaged, she kept saying, Emma's ring is 2 carats, mine needs to be at least 3. When we started venue shopping, nothing was good enough because it wasn't as good as yours. I sat back stunned. Does anyone else know? My parents? Your parents think she's pregnant. She's making me go along with it until she can figure something out. She's even wearing one of those silicone fake bellies under her clothes when she sees them. He pulled out his phone and showed me an Amazon receipt for a 12-week pregnancy simulator belly. You need to tell them the truth, I said. He shook his head. She threatened to tell everyone I cheated on her if I say anything. I didn't, but her friends will back up whatever story she tells. He looked at me with desperate eyes. I don't know what to do. I don't even recognize her anymore. After Josh left, Adrian and I sat in shocked silence. Then he took my hand. This ends now, he said. We're going to your parents' house. My childhood home had never felt so foreign as when we walked up to the door that evening. My mother answered, her expression immediately hostile when she saw Adrian. Emma, finally, you need to— Is Dad home? I interrupted. We need to talk to both of you. My father appeared behind her. Have you come to apologize to your sister? Is Claire here? I asked. No, she's at her birthing class, my mother said proudly. She's being very proactive about her pregnancy. Adrian and I exchanged looks. We need to show you something, I said. In the living room, I pulled out my phone and showed them the photos Josh had sent me, the fake pregnancy test packaging, the silicone belly, and a screenshot of Claire's browser history showing searches for how to fake pregnancy symptoms, and when do doctors detect heartbeat. My mother's face went through a series of expressions: disbelief, anger, and finally a stubborn denial. These could be faked. Josh must be trying to cause problems because he knows Claire wants your venue. Mom, I said gently, Claire isn't pregnant. She made it up to manipulate all of us. My father was staring at the photos, his face ashen. I don't understand. Why would she do this? Because she's been doing things like this her entire life, and you've always believed her over everyone else, I said. You taught her that if she cries and makes a big enough scene, she gets whatever she wants. My mother stood up abruptly. I need to call Claire. This is ridiculous. Go ahead, Adrian said. But first, you should know we've already contacted the police about the attempted fraud with our vendors. That froze her in her tracks. The police? What are you talking about? Impersonating someone to modify legal contracts is fraud, Adrian explained calmly. We filed reports about the calls to our wedding planner, florist, and caterer. If Claire admits what she did and agrees to leave us alone, we won't press charges. My mother crumpled onto the couch, her face in her hands. My father just looked lost, like his entire world had tilted on its axis. I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being blamed for one of Claire's dramas. We're leaving now, I said, standing. Our wedding is happening as planned. You're still invited, but only if you understand that this kind of behavior stops now. 3 hours later, my phone exploded with notifications. Claire had posted a tearful Instagram video announcing she'd lost the baby due to stress, and explicitly blaming me. The comments were flooding in, people calling me heartless, saying I'd caused her miscarriage by not giving her my wedding venue. The doorbell rang. It was Josh, looking even worse than before, with a suitcase. She's gone completely off the deep end, he said. When her parents called about the fake pregnancy, she trashed our apartment, screaming that I must have told you. Then she locked herself in the bathroom and staged this miscarriage scene with red food coloring. When I refused to take her to the hospital for a fake emergency, she called her parents screaming that I was abusive. Where is she now? Adrian asked, letting Josh in. Your parents came and got her, but not before she told all our friends and her entire social media following that I caused her miscarriage by pushing her during an argument. He showed us his phone, messages calling him a murderer, threats, even his boss asking him not to come to work until the situation was resolved. I need a place to stay until I can figure out what to do, he said. We set Josh up in our spare room, and Adrian called his brother, who was a lawyer. Meanwhile, my phone rang. Mark, don't check social media, he warned. Claire's gone nuclear. Mom finally admitted to me that you showed them proof Claire was faking, but now they're all in on this miscarriage story. They're afraid of looking bad, so they're letting her publicly accuse her husband of abuse and me of causing a miscarriage that never happened? I was incredulous. Pretty much. Listen, I've booked a flight. I'll be there tomorrow. Nobody messes with my little sister's wedding. The next week was like living in a soap opera. Claire's miscarriage post went viral in our community. She gave tearful interviews to local news about her trauma. My parents' house became a hub for well-wishers, bringing casseroles and sympathy cards. Meanwhile, Josh filed for divorce and got a restraining order after Claire showed up at his work, screaming accusations. My wedding vendors all received threatening messages from concerned community members, urging them to drop my event because I was toxic and had blood on my hands. The venue called in a panic because someone had started a petition to deny us service. My photographer backed out after receiving harassing calls. My bridal shop called to say someone claiming to be me had tried to cancel my final dress fitting. It felt like my entire wedding was being torn apart piece by piece. Then, an unexpected guardian angel appeared. Melissa, our wedding planner, called with determination in her voice. "I've been in this business for 15 years, she said. "I've seen bridezillas, momzillas, and family feuds, but nothing like this. I've called in every favor I have. We're going to make your wedding happen if it's the last thing I do." Melissa rallied a coalition of wedding vendors who dealt with similar situations. They created a secure communication system just for our wedding. The venue hired extra security. A photographer friend of Melissa's who'd experienced online harassment offered to step in for free. Adrian's entire family mobilized, creating a protective barrier around our plans. Mark arrived and immediately took over dealing with our parents, giving me space to breathe. Adrian's brother sent Claire a cease and desist letter threatening legal action for defamation. But the most surprising ally was my Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, who showed up at our apartment unannounced. "I've watched this dynamic play out your entire life," she said, hugging me tightly. "Claire pulls some stunt, your parents enable her, and you get hurt in the process. Not this time. I've told your mother she needs therapy, not another casserole." Aunt Patricia became my unofficial bodyguard, accompanying me to final fittings and tastings to ensure no further sabotage. When Claire somehow found out about our rehearsal dinner location and made a reservation for the same night, Patricia handled the manager personally. 2 days before the wedding, we were as ready as we could be. Security was arranged, vendors were locked down, friends had formed a protective circle around us. Josh was staying with Adrian's brother until the wedding was over. Then my phone rang. My father. "Emma." He sounded older, tired. "Can we talk? Just you and me?" We met at a diner halfway between our homes. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. "Your mother doesn't know I'm here," he said after ordering coffee. She's not thinking clearly right now." I waited. "I found Claire's journal," he continued. She wrote about planning this. All of it. The fake pregnancy, taking your venue, even the fake miscarriage. She had it all written out like some kind of project plan. He pushed a photocopy across the table. There it was in Claire's handwriting. A detailed scheme to announce a fake pregnancy, use it to get my venue, and if that failed, fake a miscarriage to make Emma look like the bad guy. "I don't understand." My father's voice broke. "Where did we go wrong with her?" For the first time, I felt sorry for him. "You loved her too much in the wrong ways, Dad. You never taught her that she can't always get everything she wants." He nodded slowly. "Your brother said something similar." He looked up at me, eyes red-rimmed. "I'm so sorry, Emma. For everything. For not seeing what was happening all these years. What about Mom?" He sighed heavily. "She's still convinced Claire's miscarriage was real. She refuses to look at the journal. Says I'm betraying the family by questioning Claire. And you? Do you still want to come to the wedding? If you'll still have me, I'll come alone if I need to." I reached across the table and took his hand. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. The morning of my wedding dawned clear and beautiful. I woke up feeling surprisingly calm. Whatever Claire tried to pull today, I was ready. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "Claire's been admitted to the hospital. Apparent anxiety attack. Mom's with her. Dad's on his way to the venue. One less thing to worry about." Aunt Patricia arrived to help me get ready, along with my two best friends. Adrian's mother brought breakfast and happy tears. As I slipped into my dress, the one I'd chosen 3 years ago when we first got engaged, I felt a sense of triumph. Despite everything, this day was still ours. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. At 3:30, as I was putting the finishing touches on my makeup, Melissa burst into the bridal suite. "Don't panic," she said, which immediately made me panic. But Claire just arrived at the venue. Security stopped her at the entrance, but she's making a scene. She's wearing a white dress. Of course she was. "Is she alone?" I asked. "Your mother's with her. They're demanding to be let in. Your mother is saying Claire needs to use the bathroom urgently due to her post-miscarriage complications." I exchanged looks with Aunt Patricia, who immediately stood up. "I'll handle my sister." "No," I said, surprising myself. "I need to do this." Melissa looked uncertain. "The ceremony starts in 30 minutes. This won't take long." Security escorted me through a side entrance so I could approach the main doors from inside. Through the glass, I could see Claire in a flowing white gown, her face tear-stained but makeup perfect, leaning dramatically on our mother. I opened the door. "Claire." She straightened immediately, eyes widening at the sight of me in my wedding dress. "Emma, I just needed—" "No," I said quietly. "You don't need anything here. This is my wedding, the one you tried to steal, the one you've been trying to destroy for weeks." "How dare you?" my mother started, but I held up my hand. "I've seen Claire's journal, Mom. I know everything was planned, the fake pregnancy, the fake miscarriage, all of it." Claire's face went white. "You're lying. Dad found it. He gave me copies. It's all there in your handwriting." My mother looked uncertainly at Claire, whose expression was morphing from shock to fury. "So what if I did?" Claire suddenly hissed. "You've always had everything handed to you. Perfect grades, perfect boyfriend, perfect career. For once, I wanted something better than you." "My wedding venue isn't just some prize to win, Claire. It's part of the most important day of my life. A life that doesn't revolve around you." I turned to my mother. "You have a choice to make right now. You can leave with Claire and continue enabling her lies, or you can come inside, sit down, and be my mother at my wedding." My mother looked torn, glancing between us. Claire grabbed her arm. "Mom, I'm feeling faint. I need to go to the hospital." Classic Claire, manufacturing an emergency when she was losing control of the situation. But for once, my mother hesitated. "Claire, enough. Your father told me about the journal." Claire's face contorted with rage. "He's lying. Everyone's lying. Why won't anyone believe me?" Security stepped forward as Claire's voice rose to a scream. My mother looked stunned, as if seeing her youngest daughter clearly for the first time. "Mrs. Harrison," one of the guards said gently to my mother, "would you like to come inside for the ceremony?" After one long last look at Claire, my mother nodded slowly and let go of her arm. "You can't be serious," Claire gasped. "You're choosing her?" "I'm choosing the truth," my mother said quietly. "It's time to get help, Claire." As security escorted Claire back to her car, my mother turned to me with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but..." I pulled her into a hug, surprising us both. "We'll talk later. Right now, I'm getting married." The ceremony was perfect. My father walked me down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. My mother sat in the front row beside Aunt Patricia, looking equal parts heartbroken and proud. Mark stood as Adrian's best man, beaming at me as I approached the altar. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to our union, there was a moment of tense silence, but no dramatic interruption came. The reception was filled with love and laughter. Josh came out of hiding to celebrate with us, receiving supportive hugs from everyone who knew what he'd been through. My parents stayed mostly quiet, still processing everything, but they made a point of thanking each vendor for standing by us. As Adrian and I shared our first dance, I caught sight of my mother watching us with a new expression, something like respect. Later that night, as we were leaving for our honeymoon, my father pressed an envelope into my hand. "A little extra for your trip," he said, "and a promise to do better." Inside was a generous check, but more importantly, a handwritten note. "Emma, for years we've been blind to the dynamic between you and your sister. That blindness hurt you repeatedly, and we failed to protect you as parents should. Today marks a new beginning, not just for you and Adrian, but for our entire family. Claire is starting therapy next week. Your mother and I are joining her for family sessions. We have a long road ahead to repair the damage done, but we're committed to the journey. We love you and are so proud of the strong woman you've become, not despite our mistakes, but perhaps to survive them. All our love, Dad." I tucked the note into my going-away bag, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. Claire's manipulations had nearly destroyed my wedding, but in the process, they had finally exposed a family dynamic that had been hurting me my entire life. As Adrian and I drove away from the venue, rice still in our hair and cans rattling behind the car, I realized something important. I had won. Not just my venue or my wedding day, but my freedom from being Claire's eternal supporting character. For the first time in my life, I was the undisputed main character in my own story, and it was a story with a very happy ending.